Hey, okay, so today we're going to be talking all about window of tolerance. Now, the window of tolerance is a concept that Dr. Dan Siegel, who's a psychiatrist, came up with, and he speaks all about the concept that we want our clients to all be operating in their window of tolerance, which means optimal arousal. What does that mean? So I'm just going to show you. I'm going to show you a picture that Janina Fisher actually has in her flip chart, which I've used before. Okay. And then I'm going to show you how to actually use this exercise for your client, okay? So when we talk about a window of tolerance, what we're doing is that we are, let me draw it for you with a pen. Let me get a pen. We have a bunch of colorful items here for our clients. So right here, let's use, okay. I'll show you. I'm going to choose a color. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to draw a window of tolerance. What's the window? The window is like this. You basically draw two lines, okay? So there's a high line and a low line, okay? So basically, okay, that's the window of tolerance. And we want our clients to be able to tell us on a daily basis where they operate, where they function, okay? So what does the window of tolerance mean? What it means is in this area, this is called optimal arousal. In this area is the optimal space for people to function. This is where we can think and feel at the same time. When you're here, you're in the red zone. This is like hyperactivity, hyper-aware, anxious, panicky, racing thoughts. And when you're here, you're hypo, okay? So for example, let me just put the words in. And we use this, number one, for psychoeducation, and number two, for developing treatment goals. And I'll show you how we do that, okay? So let's just put in optimal. So, okay, so here we have hyperarousal up here on top, right? In the middle we have optimal, and then on the bottom is hypo. Hyper means, think for just a minute, and I'll show you Janina Fisher's script in a minute, but like hyper means, imagine someone who's very hyper. The body, the nervous system, the mind, the energy, it's like above, right? It's like racing thoughts, feeling of like panic, impulsivity, right? Hypervigilance, being very much on the lookout, feeling defensive, feeling unsafe, feeling very reactive, and having racy thoughts, probably even angry, okay? So that's hyper up here, okay? Hypo down here is kind of feeling like dissociated, which means disassociated, disconnected from yourself, feeling numb, kind of feeling kind of dead, feeling very depressed, having no feelings, no energy, can't think, right? Feeling disconnected, just feeling like you're not there, and feeling possibly even like ashamed or you can't say no. There's just like no energy, okay? So we all have clients that either live in the hyper arena or close to it, and we have clients that present more with hypo, right? That's the whole concept of the sympathetic or the parasympathetic nervous system, right? The people who are either overactivated or underactivated, and we need both. We need to have the capacity to kind of go up and up here when we're feeling, we have to present for a presentation or when we are processing through things in our life. And then we do need the capacity to kind of go down. But when we're in either of these places, it doesn't feel very good in our bodies, and we can't think and feel at the same time. We're usually just stuck in one, either thinking too much or feeling too much or not feeling at all. Optimal arousal is right here. Optimal arousal is where you have like a balance, right? Where your feelings and your reactions are tolerable. So even if I have big feelings, or even if I feel a little anxious, I kind of go up here, but I could come back down and I could regulate, right? I could regulate myself, or I could go down and feel a little depressed, but I could come back up, right? So you're thinking and feeling at the same time, and your reactions adapt to fit whatever's going on. So like my child says, "Mom," and I say, "Yes, honey," or a friend says, "Hey, I won't be able to go out tonight for dinner," and I say, "I'm so sad, but I understand," right? And I'm having an appropriate reaction. I'm not having a disproportionate reaction of either being like F you, or like furious or mad, or just like never want to speak to them again, or like no problem, right? Like people pleasing. So there's like the optimal capacity right here, okay? So basically what happens is, I'll just show you from Janina Fisher's flip chart, She has a flip chart, right? I think I've mentioned it before, psychoeducational aids for working with psychological trauma. So she talks about this specific to trauma, but I'll talk about just nervous system in general. The ways that we grow up or the ways that we experience life in our past and in our present impact our capacity to regulate. One of the main goals in therapy, and in trauma therapy specifically, is teaching clients the capacity, A, to understand their nervous systems, the way that their body operates, like what is your natural operating level, why it operates that way, understanding what helps them kind of calm down or get more energy and find that balance. And then the next step is, how do we look at the areas that are impacting your functioning and then use that for our treatment goal, right? If somebody's feeling very anxious in the mornings, or if somebody's feeling very depressed in the evenings or on the weekends, or just all the time is very depressed or very anxious, then we literally look at the areas or understand what's going on. If there's a thought, a feeling, a memory, or a situation that's related to that, it could be a real-time situation or something from the past, or a way that their nervous system has learned to operate, and then you connect that to your goals for treatment, okay? But this is more of like a psychoeducational tool for your client and for yourself, and it also helps create goals and treatment. So here, Janina Fisher just has like a picture here, but Dan Siegel created it, right? He's a psychiatrist. In 1999, he came up with the term window of tolerance. And literally, here's kind of the window, right? This is an example of like when we work with a client, we literally have them like do like on a regular day, how does it usually feel to be in your own mind and body, right? So it's like there's up, right? And then this is just a sample going down and then comes back up and down and kind of here. Now I'm just going to show you for an example what I think is an ideal window of tolerance. Well, there's no ideal, but what I'll tell you, a healthy window that people operate in is, I'm kind of going to draw it. So let's just say there's like up and down, right? So here's, and I know this sounds very ideal, but here's like an ideal window of tolerance, right? So there's ups and there's downs, there's different moods, but the person has the capacity to navigate. Now, what you do with the client is you literally do this, right? You literally have a client, you literally will draw, you explain to them the concept of the window of tolerance, you explain to them the concept of the hyper, the hypo, and the optimal, right, that you're working towards, because that's part of knowing that therapy is helping or that something is good in their life. Right? You might even just say, let's just look at, the people and the places or the situations that make you feel calm, right? Or make you feel okay. So you literally have with the client, what you do is, and you could have them do it themselves or you do it for them. So you literally take a piece of paper and you draw 2 lines and you say, we're going to get to know your window of tolerance, right? And you literally have them draw on a daily basis. Tell me what your window looks like. Okay, and so I've had clients, and I'll just give you an example. Someone might say, okay, let's think. In the morning when I wake up with this panic and this dread, right? So I have this huge feeling of panic, right? Because I have a whole work day, I have my children, or I feel lonely, whatever it is, right? And then I calm down, I have my coffee, I start work, I'm not as worried, then I have whatever it is, right? 6 p.m. comes, I'm going through this very easily, right? And then I feel really depressed because I think about my marriage or I think about whatever's going on and I feel inadequate. And then I come back up here and then I go to sleep. I feel really anxious. This is where I drink alcohol. And then I go to sleep and I numb myself and I kind of go down here. Okay? So when you look at this is just an example. When you look at this, what I'm going to get very curious about is what's causing the anxiety here. So this could be kind of like, let me choose a different color pen. So this could be like, let me look at what's going on in the mornings that's causing this person so much anxiety, right? And I might use that for a target in EMDR or for trauma work or even just the goal in therapy of like there's a level of anxiety when you wake up or a few minutes after you wake up. What's happening in your body somatically? What's going on in your mind? What's the situation in your life, right? That could be a current day situation that's stressful, or what somatic or emotional symptoms or belief or memories, or it could be just a feeling of anxiety or depression or something going on that's causing your nervous system up here, okay? Now, we'll look at what happens here, and I might get curious, well, what helps you throughout the day? So your coffee. Oh, once, your kids go out to school and you get into a rhythm, so there's something very calming about rhythm. So we look at what does work, right? Kind of what is helping you, and then we look at what happens here. Okay, so in your marriage, there's a real feeling of sadness or hopelessness or worry, right, about what's going on. So and then we're going to target this as another target, right, or another goal for therapy. Let's look at this, right? So your body's exhausted, but there's also this feeling of depression or sadness that comes here when you think about that. And then we look at their capacity to come up, and then there's a big level of anxiety, which we're going to look at, right? Maybe it's like, after the sadness or depression, there's a fight with the husband, and then there's a lot of rage or anger or intensity, and then it's kind of like this person uses alcohol to numb, right? And what they're doing is they are numbing, and they're using a certain coping skill, which you want to look at because that would become a target. Like, let's look at other ways to self-soothe or to process. And then they drop back down, and then they kind of go to sleep from this place of like down, depressed, hypoarousal. And then the process starts all over again. Now, what you want to look at is literally looking at these as targets. I literally would tell a client, we're going to look at these things because these are really important. Now, clients might say, well, I'm just going to show you one day. Come on. Like, I have so many things going on. And I say, I know, but we're going to work on one at a time. Okay? So, or a client might say, I have something on the weekends and something during the week. So I'll say, let's just start with yesterday. Or let's just start with what feels most important, right? Maybe on the weekends, it's a completely different target. Maybe on the weekends, there's a certain trigger that's much harder than the rest of the week. And then we look at that as a separate target, but we always start with one at a time. Okay, so here what I would look at is this anxiety. Now that just begins the conversation to look at it, right? This feeling. Now the anxiety could also be connected to the fact that her marriage is in a bad place, right? And she feels really lonely and she has a lot to take care of. But you're only going to get to know slowly over time, or it could be something different. Maybe she feels overwhelmed having to take care of her kids. Maybe she has emotional neglect. Maybe she just feels anxious because her body has unprocessed anxiety and she doesn't know how to self-soothe. And then there's some behaviors that you could help her learn to just regulate when she thinks about waking up and facing the day, right? Maybe she never taught those self-soothing skills. So I don't know if it's something that's just a skill she hasn't learned or if she has to process some kind of emotional experience from the past, but this is going to help identify that, okay? So here you already have like 4 goals. Now, you're not identifying these as 4 separate goals, but you say we're going to hold this in mind as we work together. Okay, so that's kind of part of the goal. Now, you will have some clients that, I know I've had a client who literally drew a window of tolerance, and it was kind of like, she literally drew a window, and she said, this is how she operates, right? She's like, I'm hanging out up here, okay? So, and then we looked at like some of the factors that we think, what could be connected to the fact that she's so much in hyperarousal. Okay, and that's a client with chronic anxiety. And then I had a client who literally said, she has a lot of anxiety, but then she drops into hypo, and then she just hangs out there, right? And so the piece over here, just so you know, teaching moment, and then I'm just going to wrap. The piece over here is to get someone out of hypo. You can't just get someone out of hypo and come back up. The whole thing about hypo is the person has no energy and is very, very depressed. So obviously, medication aside, for some people, they need medication either for the hyper or for the hypo. But in addition to medication that sometimes the client needs or doesn't need, depending on the situation, in order to get a person out of here, we have to get a certain level of energy. They have to come back up, and then they can self-regulate, right? Or usually what happens is a level of depression. We usually have to come back, feel some kind of anxiety or activity, right? Or at least come up into the higher levels, and then they could regulate. Because from here, it's very difficult to come back up. So when somebody is in hypo, we want to look at giving them engaging in activities or behaviors in therapy that brings them up. You don't do a deep trauma processing. You don't do too much talk therapy when someone's down here. We have to get the energy level a little bit back up because there needs to be a level of energy and activity to re-engage the person. With anxiety, what you do is you want to bring them back down, right? You want to do like calming activities or regulation or mindfulness, right? If that's calming for them. For some people, mindfulness is triggering, but then you engage in a different kind of soothing behavior or activity. For hypo, and people are very depressed, you want to look at what's causing this. Usually hypo means there's too much, and they're kind of just shut down. You want to look at what got them here, how did they get here, and then how do we slowly, and by the way, I just have to say one last piece, even if someone's in hypo all the time, to me, progress is, wow, there's some movement of coming closer to the window of tolerance. So even if someone's down here, there might be progress of like you're very depressed, a little less depressed. Very depressed, a little less depressed, right? And even in anxiety, a client might say, well, I'm not experiencing shifts. And I say, well, number one, we're starting to see what triggers you and what helps you. So that's number one, even just becoming aware, making some shifts and starting to learn how to take care of your own mind and body differently. And number two, even if there's a shift of like a little bit closer to the window of tolerance or dipping into the window for a few minutes every day and then coming back out because that's where they live, that's huge shifts. That's reteaching the body how to regulate. Obviously, the goal is to get them to be in here, but you want to be looking at those shifts. Okay, so that's the way to do the window of tolerance exercise.